London greeted the beginning of the season with the usual clatter of wheels, rustle of silk, and restless hunger of a city determined to judge. Lady Eleanor Hargrave felt all of it pressing against her as her aunt's carriage rolled to a halt before Lancaster House, its marble steps gleaming beneath lanternlight. The horses stamped impatiently, and Eleanor wished she could trade places with them. At least they were permitted to snort their irritation. She, however, must smile, curtsy, and pretend she wished to be welcomed back into a world that had already condemned her once. She stepped down, shoulders straight beneath the modest blue gown her aunt insisted was respectable. Respectable, yes, but hardly disarming enough to soften memories of her father's scandal. Eleanor lifted her chin as a footman opened the grand doors, revealing the blaze of chandeliers and the swell of violins. The ball was in full motion, a whirl of elegance she had grown adept at surviving but never enjoyed. She inhaled slowly, preparing her expression as her aunt adjusted her gloves with trembling fuss. Within moments, the whispers began. Eleanor felt them rather than heard them, the subtle shift of eyes, the polite but unmistakable avoidance as couples drifted past. She forced herself not to look down, though the temptation burned. She would not shrink. Not tonight. Not ever again. A young viscount approached with the stiff politeness of a man carrying out an unwelcome duty. "Lady Hargrave," he said, bowing. "A pleasure seeing you returned to London." Returned. She almost laughed. "You are kind, my lord." "Quite." He hesitated, glancing around as though searching for escape. "Do excuse me." He vanished before she could reply. The dismissal was clear. Her aunt whispered, "Ignore them, dearest." "Yes," Eleanor murmured, "but they lose interest when a lady is no longer fashionable to condemn." There was no time for further comfort. A hush swept through the ballroom. The Duke of Locksley had arrived. Alexander Hawthorne crossed the threshold with the assured ease of a man accustomed to admiration. Tall, impeccably dressed, with a presence that commanded attention, he moved through the room like a tide altering every current. Ladies angled their fans, gentlemen stepped aside. He greeted no one for more than a breath, yet each person looked faintly dazzled. Eleanor deliberately looked away. She had no intention of being another orbiting object in the Duke's brilliant path. Men like him, polished, confident, accustomed to being wanted, never saw her as anything but an oddity. Better to avoid disappointment. Unfortunately, her refusal to stare seemed to interest him more than admiration could. She sensed his gaze before she met it. When she finally looked across the room, her breath stilled. He was watching her, truly watching, not in idle curiosity but with startling focus. Eleanor turned slightly, pretending not to notice, but her pulse betrayed her. Moments later, he was approaching. Her aunt attempted an awkward curtsy, but the Duke hardly glanced her way. His eyes were on Eleanor alone. "Lady Hargrave," he said, bowing with court-perfect grace. "I do not believe we have been introduced." Eleanor returned the bow with cautious politeness. "Your Grace. I doubt we move in the same circles." "An unfortunate oversight," he replied. "London prides itself on noticing interesting company. I was not aware the city concerned itself with my company at all." A small smile tugged at his lips. "It concerns me." Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks. "You must be mistaken, Your Grace. There are far more captivating ladies here. And yet," he said, "none of them look at me the way you do." "I have not looked at you at all." "Precisely." Nearby guests murmured. It was not every evening that the Duke pursued a woman who refused to simper. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "whatever amusement you seek, you will not find it with me." "I am not seeking amusement," he murmured. "Merely conversation." "Then you will be disappointed. I have little to offer beyond weary politeness." "On the contrary," he said, "you appear to possess honesty. Rare, in this room." Eleanor inhaled sharply, unsettled by the sincerity. She steadied herself. "I think it best we do not prolong this." Why? Because, she said, I do not wish to be another name whispered tonight. He regarded her for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he stepped back. Very well, Lady Hargrave. But know this, it is not London's whispers that interest me, only yours. With a final bow, he departed, leaving Eleanor standing in stunned silence. Her aunt clutched her arm. Eleanor, what have you done? Nothing, Eleanor whispered. Across the ballroom, the Duke paused, watching her one last time before disappearing into the crowd, a subtle promise in the slight incline of his head. Yet even as the music swelled and dancers resumed their sweeping patterns, Eleanor felt the echo of his words linger like a faint vibration in the air. She tried to quell the sensation, telling herself it was nothing more than the shock of being addressed so publicly by a man whose notice could stir chaos. And still, she sensed an undercurrent, an awareness unwelcome yet undeniably present. She had spent years constructing barriers of reserve, discipline, and careful indifference, but his gaze had slipped past them, leaving a trace she could not easily dismiss. Her aunt fussed beside her, urging her toward the refreshment table, but Eleanor barely heard her. She saw, instead, the way guests cast speculative glances her way, as though evaluating whether the Duke's brief attention elevated her or endangered her further. She knew well enough how quickly London could twist curiosity into condemnation. If the Duke persisted, the consequences might be more complicated than she cared to imagine, and certainly more perilous than she deserved. She steadied herself, bracing might follow next. The days following the ball unfolded with an odd mixture of calm routine and subtle unrest, for Eleanor could not shake the sense that the Duke of Locksley had marked her in some inexplicable way. She attempted to resume her quiet existence with her aunt, occupying herself with morning readings and modest social calls, yet her thoughts returned, unwillingly, to the memory of his unwavering gaze. She resented the intrusion, though she could not entirely deny the faint stir of curiosity it provoked. The season had only begun, and already she suspected her name would appear in more conversations than she wished to imagine. Her suspicions proved correct when she encountered him again, this time in Hyde Park, where the fashionable hours had drawn a river of carriages and promenading families beneath the afternoon sunlight. Eleanor and her aunt had barely completed a single circuit when she noticed him approaching on horseback, his posture straight, his expression keenly attentive. She prayed he might pass without acknowledgement, yet he inclined his head with unmistakable intent, guiding his horse into a graceful halt beside them. "Lady Hargrave," he greeted, his tone warm but devoid of presumption. "I trust the morning finds you well." Eleanor managed a small curtsy, determined not to reveal the unease fluttering beneath her calm. "It does, Your Grace. I hope the same may be said of you." He smiled faintly, as though amused by her restraint. "Indeed. I find the air agreeable today." Her aunt brightened uselessly, sensing social advantage, but Eleanor kept her voice even. "The park is always pleasant when one finds quiet." "Ah," he replied, "then I must be disrupting it." She almost smiled, though she checked herself quickly. "Not at all, Your Grace. I merely observe that London seldom grants its citizens the peace they crave." His expression softened. "You speak as though the city presses upon you. I hope it is not on my account." Eleanor wished he would cease looking at her with such clarity. "London's habits have nothing to do with you, sir." "Then perhaps you allow me the hope that your habits may yet include conversation." She stiffened slightly. "I am not certain my conversation is worthy of your interest." "It is precisely because you think so that it is," he replied. "But I shall not force words from you. I am content merely to wish you a pleasant afternoon." He bowed, guided his horse forward, and vanished into the stream of aristocratic riders. Her aunt exhaled, as though she had been holding her breath for an eternity. "Eleanor," she whispered, "the Duke of Locksley does not stop for ladies without reason." "Yes," Eleanor muttered. "That is what concerns me." She meant it, yet she could not entirely dismiss the unexpected flicker of relief that he had spoken to her without mockery or condescension. It was a dangerous comfort, one she must not allow to grow. 2 days later, a simple envelope appeared among the morning letters, discreetly addressed in elegant script to Lady Eleanor Hargrave. There was no seal, no crest, nothing that hinted at its origin. Her aunt urged her to open it, and inside Eleanor found a single pressed violet, preserved with deliberate care between thick paper. No note accompanied it. No explanation offered itself. Yet she knew instantly who had sent it. A soft unease filled her. The gesture was gentle, thoughtful, almost intimate, yet she did not know what to make of it. She refused to consider it a courtship token. She placed the violet inside one of her father's old books, telling herself she wished only to protect it from damage. She returned to her morning as if nothing significant had occurred, though her heartbeat betrayed her. The following week brought far less pleasant attention. During a modest gathering at a charity musicale, Eleanor found herself momentarily cornered by an enthusiastic young scholar who had once studied under her father. Their conversation lasted only a minute, yet it was enough for several matrons to observe with narrowed eyes. By the next afternoon, whispers had begun, that Eleanor consorted with radicals, that she harbored dangerous opinions, that her father's disgrace echoed through her conduct. Eleanor felt the chill of social rejection reassert itself with ruthless familiarity. Invitations expected for the coming week were mysteriously absent. A few acquaintances who previously offered polite smiles now avoided her gaze entirely. She bore it with a composure she had learned long ago, though her aunt fretted as though calamity hovered at their door. What Eleanor did not expect was the Duke's intervention. At Almack's 2 nights later, she stood alone near the refreshments, determined to appear unconcerned by the whispers drifting like smoke around the room. Without warning, the Duke approached her directly, bowing before her with the same courtesy he might offer a queen. His voice carried just enough volume to ensure others heard. "Lady Hargrave," he said, "I had hoped I might encounter you this evening. The room seems markedly improved by your presence." A ripple surged through the surrounding guests. Eleanor felt her pulse spike with helpless alarm. "Your Grace," she murmured, "you flatter me beyond reason." "I assure you," he answered, "I speak with perfect sincerity." She sensed the audience forming around them and attempted to step back, but he offered his arm boldly. After a hesitation too brief to count, she accepted, knowing refusal would create even greater scandal. He led her through the room with unmistakable pride, as though shielding her from every whisper. She could hardly breathe. "Your Grace," she whispered when they reached a quieter corner, "you must not attach yourself to my circumstances. It will damage your standing." He looked at her with steady conviction. "My standing is not so fragile as society pretends. And your dignity requires no defense, but I offer it willingly." His sincerity pressed against her defenses, yet she kept her voice firm. "This is unwise. Perhaps," he allowed, "but I find I no longer enjoy wisdom as much as I once did." Despite herself, she felt the faintest tremor of warmth. He released her arm at last, offering a small bow before rejoining the assembly, leaving her with the weight of his gesture settling heavily in her chest. Later that evening, alone in her room, Eleanor found herself recalling every word he spoke, every quiet defiance he displayed on her behalf. She wished she could dismiss it as arrogance or manipulation, yet she knew instinctively that such actions required vulnerability on his part. That realization unsettled her more than any rumor. Still, she reminded herself of her resolve. She wanted nothing from him. Nothing at all. And yet, despite every caution she clung to, she sensed that the Duke had no intention of ceasing his pursuit. Not when he seemed determined to understand the very woman who wished least to be understood. Rain hammered against the tall windows of Locksley House, as though determined to breach its refined composure. The midsummer gathering had begun under clear skies, yet the sudden storm forced guests indoors, compressing them into drawing rooms already crowded with polite laughter and unspoken rivalries. Eleanor had attended only at her aunt's insistence, fully aware that her presence would rouse another wave of speculation. She moved quietly along the edges of conversation, searching for a moment of solitude. At last she slipped into the library, grateful for the hush that greeted her. The fire crackled gently, illuminating rows of polished volumes and casting warm light across the cavernous room. She approached a shelf almost at random, trailing her fingertips along the spines. Here, at least, she could pretend she belonged among words rather than society's relentless scrutiny. She inhaled the familiar scent of old paper and leather, letting her heartbeat settle. But the library door opened softly, and she stiffened. She knew the rhythm of that step before she turned. The Duke stood in the doorway, rain-damp hair slightly disordered, as though he had braved the storm himself rather than wait for servants with umbrellas. His gaze softened when it found hers. "I suspected you might flee the crowd," he said. "I hoped I was not mistaken." Eleanor's composure tightened. "I sought quiet, Your Grace. Nothing more." He crossed the threshold slowly, as if careful not to disturb her fragile refuge. "Then I shall keep my voice low, if you will allow me to stay." She should have refused. She should have curtsied and left at once. Yet something in his gaze, a steadiness, an honesty she could neither invite nor deny, held her in place. "You may stay," she said quietly, "if you intend no further disruption." "Disruption is the last thing I desire where you are concerned," he replied. She turned toward the fire, unwilling to meet the full force of his sincerity. "You have already disrupted my life more than you know." "I suspect I know precisely," he said. "My actions at Almack's placed you in a difficult position. I should apologize." "You should not have intervened at all," she answered, a tremor beneath her calm. "Your attention has consequences I cannot afford." He approached until they stood only a few paces apart. "Eleanor," he said, and the use of her name shook her. "I did what I believed was right." She faced him, unable to conceal the strain any longer. "Right for whom? You risk nothing by offering protection. I risk everything by accepting it. If London decides I wield influence over you, I will be condemned again. If they decide you champion me, you will suffer in turn. Do not pretend your choices carry no cost." His expression deepened, shadows flickering across his features. "I am not pretending. I am choosing." Her breath caught, unprepared for the certainty in his voice. "You choose too quickly. You know nothing of me beyond a handful of conversations." "That handful," he replied, "reveals more sincerity than I have found in a lifetime of polished courtiers." "You mistake caution for sincerity," she insisted. "I speak plainly because I have no social armor left to maintain." "Then let me be your armor," he said softly. She recoiled slightly, not from fear but from the ache such words awakened. "You misunderstand me. I do not seek a shield. My father's fall taught me never to depend upon another person's strength. When he lost everything, I learned to stand alone. If I rely upon you, I risk repeating that ruin." "I do not fear ruin," he answered. "Not if it brings truth." His nearness unsettled her, yet she sensed restraint in every breath he took. "You speak as though truth is simple. It is not. The truth is that your attention to me invites scrutiny neither of us can control. The truth is that I cannot endure another public collapse. And the truth," she said, voice trembling, "is that I do not know what you want from me." He stepped closer, but with the careful, measured grace of a man unwilling to impose. "I want to understand you. I want to know the mind that defies me. I want to know the woman who looks at me without fear or flattery. I want you to stop picturing yourself as a burden to anyone who dares care for you." Her composure wavered. She felt exposed, seen in a way she had avoided for years. A single step backward brought her against the heavy desk near the fire. He halted instantly, granting her space even as tension thrummed between them. "You assume kindness is enough," she murmured. "But kindness cannot rewrite the past." "No," he agreed. "But courage can reshape the future. And you possess more than you admit." She turned away, pressing her hand to the polished wood. "I wish I could believe that." "Then allow me to show you." His words were quiet, resolute. She closed her eyes, knowing she was dangerously close to yielding something deeper than pride, hope. She steadied herself before speaking. If you continue this pursuit, you will face consequences. I cannot protect you from them. I have never asked for protection, he replied. Only honesty. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the room. She faced him again, finding him watching her not with hunger or triumph, but with rare vulnerability. That vulnerability unraveled the last of her resistance. Very well, she whispered. If it is honesty you seek, then hear mine. He waited, still as stone. I am afraid, she said. Not of you, but of what your presence demands of me. I am afraid of caring. I am afraid of losing. I am afraid of being seen as weak or wanting. And I am afraid that if I let you near, I will not know how to stop. The Duke's eyes softened with a tenderness she had not anticipated. Then let me be the one who does not leave. Let me be the one who does not falter. Before she could answer, the library door burst open. A footman stepped inside, breathless. Your Grace, he said urgently, a matter requires your immediate attention. A report has surfaced suggesting Lady Hargrave's involvement with a political radical. The palace is concerned. They advise distance. Eleanor's stomach dropped, dread flooding her. She stepped back instinctively, already preparing to retreat, to spare him the burden of her name. But Alexander turned to the footman with unshakable calm. Inform the palace, he said, that I stand exactly where I choose to stand. He looked at Eleanor then, slowly, deliberately, his meaning unmistakable. And for the first time since her return to London, she felt something steady beneath her trembling heart, the fragile beginning of trust.